the scriptures become real. It's going to podcast where we learn, where we study, where we grow. We try to become the best versions of ourselves as we can, as we continue to serve our Lord. Again, you guys find the podcast on YouTube or in Real, so you get your podcast. We're so thankful you guys are here, that you guys have found us, and that you guys are with us today. All right, guys. I'm so excited to start with this podcast today. I think this is going to be one of those ones that can really help you guys. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed studying this because I need it, and hopefully you need it as well as we study this and we look at this honestly. Really quick, so next week we're going to start a 3-part series starting Monday entitled Finding Forgiveness. Right, this is one of those topics that's tough. I mean, this was a tough study. This is still a hard study. It's a lot of chewing on stuff. It's a lot of meditating on things. This is hard. It's a tough study. But I hope that as we start this next week, that you really want to look at this honestly with us the next couple weeks as we look at this topic every Monday moving forward for the next 3 weeks or so. So I'm excited to do that with you guys. I'm so excited for everything that's happening here with the podcast, the new community. Check that out. Look under the links, right? The new community called Faith Becomes Reality. Look under the YouTube link. If you're listening on like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you look in your show notes. You'll see a link, SKOOL. Make a free account and click that link, and you're right there in the group with us, right? So we cannot wait to have you guys in there, and we're just so excited for everything that you guys do for us. All right, so as we're getting prepped for this, right? If you're walking, if you're in the gym, if you're in the car, wherever you're at, here's where we want to go with our podcast today. We actually want to start with a true story, okay? A story about a friend of mine named Johnny, okay? And Johnny was interested in a girl, let's call her Susie, okay? And 2 Christian people, all these people in this story are Christian people. So Johnny and Susie, they've been friends for such a long time, right? Such a long time. And naturally, right, when you're friends with someone for that long of a time, Johnny kind of felt, man, I think I kind of like her. I think I kind of like Susie, but I value our friendship to such a level that I don't want to hop over that line. You know what I mean? Because if I hop over that line, like what if she doesn't feel the same way, and then now it's awkward? So I'll just stay right here, you know, until maybe she initiates something or shows me something. I just don't want to hop over that line, right? Because I don't want to mess up our friendship here. So there's a guy named Jalen. Let's call him Jalen, right? He moves into town. Great Christian guy, good person, nothing wrong with this guy. And Jalen starts to like Susie a little bit. So again, Johnny feeling the way he feels, right? He's like, I want to support her, right? I want to support in what she's doing. They like each other, you know. I want to support both of them moving forward. So Jalen, as he's getting to know Susie, Jalen asks Susie a question. He says, Susie, what's your favorite color? Susie says, well, my favorite color is green. Green? Or why? Why is green your favorite color? Well, she said, don't laugh, but when I was a kid, even now, right, sometimes when things are tough, right, when things are difficult, when I don't understand things, right, even when there's a storm outside, right, I used to have this green teddy bear, right, I just don't know where it is. I had this green teddy bear, and I would always hold that teddy bear while I was watching a movie or just sitting down or just relaxing, because it would always kind of just give me comfort. That's why my favorite color is green. So Jalen, in his mind, he's like, green, nice. So next couple weeks, Jalen starts giving her a bunch of green stuff, which Susie's extremely grateful for. Like, here's a green pair of shoes and a green dress. Put it on. I'll pick you up at 6. We're gonna go out. Oh man, that's absolutely incredible. Like, that's my favorite color. Here's this green book, and I just wanted to give you this because I know that's your favorite color. That's absolutely amazing. Like, I love this green. That's my favorite color. But then as the weeks go on, he just keeps giving her green stuff, right? And it doesn't matter what it is. It's just green stuff over and over and over and over. And then there comes this awkward point between Jalen and Susie where it's this weird thing that maybe we're just not the best for each other, right? So it's not like one hates the other or there's issues, or it's just, you can feel that there's an incompatibility there. So then they stop talking. They stop talking to each other. Now, the weird thing about this is Johnny actually is getting ready to move. So the day that they kind of stop talking to each other, That's the day Johnny's got to leave. So Johnny goes over to Susie's house. Hey, look, I just wanted to see you before I left. I wanted to give you this stuff. So Johnny gives her a box and a note. And he said, hey, look, whenever you need something, call me, let me know, FaceTime, whatever the case might be. So then he's out. So she opens the letter. And the letter says, I know that you're going through a tough time right now, but I hope this gives you comfort, and I hope it makes you feel special. She opens the box, and it's a green teddy bear. So then she looks at that, and she looks at the note. She says, man, Johnny made me feel special. Why? What's the difference, guys? In that story and in that analogy, what's the difference between Jalen and Johnny? What's the difference? Right? Jalen's not a bad guy. He's not the villain. Johnny's not the great guy and just a hero. What's the difference between the two? Johnny listened. Johnny was learning. Johnny heard. Johnny saw her. So Jalen did that, but he only did it halfway. Well, yeah, that's your favorite color. All right, I'm going to run with that. And he just gives her green stuff. You see, so here's a principle, guys, from that story that I want to bring out. And this is going to make sense as we piece all this together. When you look at Proverbs chapter 11, this is a springboard verse that we're always going to go back to. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 25. Okay, and I want you to see the principle that God gives us. Okay, that's very, very important. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 25. The generous soul will be made rich. Now watch the end of this. This is huge. Circle, highlight, double highlight. Do what you got to do. He who waters will also be watered himself. So as we talk about this topic of you just make me feel so special, we're going to look at this from God's lens. Well, how could Johnny make Susie feel so special? How is that possible? How could he do that? The reason why he could do that is because Johnny, as a Christian man, was just doing what God did for him. God listens to me. God tries to understand me. God doesn't just give me things to just hope that I'm just happy because he gives me things I like. He wants to know me on an intimate level. This is not just a physical level. He wants to actually know me on an intimate level. He tries to understand. So because God does that to me, and God has watered me, and God has watered you like that, then now the people in my circle, the people that come into my life, the people that I have the chance to meet, now because God has done all of that to water me, now I'm just going to water those around me. Now, before we dive into our text of 1 Kings 19, here's why this topic is so huge, and here's why it's so special, and here's why it's difficult and a challenge. There's this concept, just like with forgiveness, there's this concept where we understand the concept with our heads, right? I get why we're supposed to be forgiving. I understand that we're supposed to be service and serving and be a servant. I get that. But the execution behind it, the reason why we don't sometimes forgive, the reason why we don't sometimes serve, it's the same reason. Because we don't want our effort, and we don't want our pain, and we don't want what we've been through to not be validated. And also we don't want those things to not be seen. So the reason why I withhold forgiveness, and we're going to get into this next week for the next 3 weeks, the reason I withhold it is because that gives me some level of power so that at least I know that I hold something over them that hurt me. So it gives me some level of power. The reason why I can't truly serve those around me, serve my brothers and sisters in Christ, serve the people you're interested in, serve your spouse, serve all these people, the reason why I truly can't unlock that is because deep down in my heart of hearts, I understand the concept of service. I will amen every sermon and every lesson and everything I ever hear on being a servant. But I just don't want what I give. I don't want my sacrifice. I don't want my time. I don't want any of that stuff wasted. Because if I truly serve the way the Bible wants me to, if I truly do that, then I'm going to be left in the cold. I'm going to be left in the dark. No one else is going to do this for me because I gave all this out. Then what happens? What happens if I give all this out and it's not appreciated? What happens when I give all this out and it's just taken and moved to the next one? So I'm trying to avoid that. So therefore, in order to avoid that, then I'll just make it conditional, or I just won't do it at all. Or I'll serve the people that I just want to serve, that I know will appreciate it. You see, we're missing the principle of Proverbs 11. He who waters will also be watered himself. We withhold true biblical service from our spouses, from our brethren, from our friends, from our family, from those that we're trying to teach and help and love. We're withholding it because deep down, we're afraid that if we give too much, if we put ourselves out there too much, if we put our hearts out there too much, no one's going to water mine. That's prideful. And if anyone's had that attitude, I've had it too. So it's not like I'm saying, well, yeah, you guys have that attitude. Yeah, it's very easy to have that attitude. I've had that. I don't really want to put myself out there to really serve because, again, what can happen? I'm afraid that if you put all this out here, I'm not going to be watered. We're not listening to God's principle. So in order to truly understand, how does God, number one, how can I make others around me feel special? But then two, how does God make me feel special? Before I can truly start to understand the watering process of God, I have to understand the originator of the water. So how does God water me? How does God water you? So before I can begin to understand Proverbs 11:25, I have to take time, and we're gonna talk about these concepts. I gotta take time to sit, to listen, and to see how God waters me. It takes a lot of time to see that. So let's look at that. We're gonna look at a couple things, but we're gonna start in 1 Kings 19. All right, so I can't wait. Let's hop in this. 1 Kings 19. 1 Kings 19. And let's begin in verse 1 as we walk through this text together. All right, so here we go. Verse 1. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Now, let's keep this in mind. What's all that Elijah had done? Keep in mind the context of this. Remember in the chapter before, in chapter 18, the challenge was issued with the prophets of Baal, right? So which God will answer? Will Baal answer us with lighting the sacrifice on fire? Or will God answer? So Elijah's sitting there on Mount Carmel just watching them cry out to God, to their God, and nothing's happening. But then Elijah cries out to the God of heaven, and that he licks up the water with fire, and then the sacrifice is there. So God is the true God. So now people are starting to notice and starting to see all this stuff. Now notice what happens, verse 2. Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when Elijah saw that, verse 3, he arose and he ran for his life. And he went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. Take a quick pause. So think about this concept. When someone is truly beaten, when someone is so discouraged by the things that are happening around them, the things happening in their home, the things happening in their life, when they're so discouraged, they hear the encouragement around them. I'm not saying that they don't hear that, but what is 2020 for them in the moment is the pain and the grief and the suffering and the weeping and the mourning and the problems. All that stuff is 2020, and that is clear as crystal to them. So when that happens, when you're in such a distraught situation like that, how in the world is God going to water them? How is God in that moment where everything that's happening to Elijah is 2020, the problems are crystal clear? How is God going to water somebody in such a dire situation? How is God going to make Elijah feel seen? How is God going to make Elijah feel special? You see, what God specializes in is before God sends somebody out, God always makes sure that they know that he sees them. And Jesus did that amazingly while he was here. Before God ever sent anybody out, he made sure that they knew, I see you. I understand you. I hear you. I've heard you. I'm understanding, and I've been watching you. He makes them feel a certain type of way. But we'll get to that in a second. Verse 4. But when he went himself a day's journey into the wilderness, he came and he sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die. And he said, this is enough. Lord, take my life. I am no better than my father's. So understand where he's at. The work is stressful. The things that are happening in his life are absolutely downtrodden. What am I going to do in this situation? You know, sometimes there's things, and what's so hard at times, guys, as people who follow God, when God puts you, let me rephrase that. Sometimes when God puts you in situations like this, and sometimes when you're in situations like this, you kind of wonder, how can God watch this? How can God sit here and not act? You know, we talked about this in our Esther series. Is God even in control? Why would he give power and authority and decision-making ability? Why would he give that to so many other people that are trying to hurt me, that are trying to do? Why would he let that happen? All these questions start flowing in your mind. And Elijah gets to a breaking point. And Elijah's breaking point is, I've had enough. You know, I saw a quote this week that said, good men and women have a breaking point. And when you get to that breaking point, you know, I've taken enough, I've done enough, I've sacrificed enough, I've done all these things. This is the point of no return for me. I'm done. I'm truly done right here. And sometimes, again, like we talk about, if we don't truly learn, study, and grow with the scriptures and really see these examples as real life, real human, real emotion, sometimes we think of ourselves as better. Well, I would never get to the point following Jesus. As a Christian today in the 21st century, I would never get to the point where I will say it is enough. God has always been enough for me. You see, that is how subtle pride can get into our lives. To where we exalt ourselves and we try to exalt our goodness in front of everybody to such a level where we present this person in front of people that's not even real. Like, we've literally crafted this person over years that everybody else knows, that we don't even know. But we've crafted this person perfectly. And we say stuff like that. And again, I understand the heart of where that's trying to come from. But the pride level in it it's glaring at times. Oh, I would never do that. I would never get into a position where I would say that. You think about Elijah, he got into the position where I'm done. You think about Jeremiah, what Jeremiah says in Jeremiah 17 through chapter 20. God, you tricked me. You said you would do all these things, and you knew me, and you formed me from the womb. You deceived me. You tricked me. Moses, after he goes to Pharaoh and he has the children of Israel behind him, let my people go. Pharaoh says, no, I'm going to double their work because you asked this. Then the people say, well, Moses, who are you? We didn't ask you to come here. We didn't ask you to save us. Moses said, why did you send me here? Why am I even doing this? You see, if you're not honest with yourself to where you've never said, I'm done, I am done helping people, I am done serving people, I'm done sacrificing, I'm done trying to be a good person, because where has being a good person got me? If you've never gotten to this point, I don't know if you've lived yet. I don't know if you've really understood the lament that these men and women in Scripture and even Jesus talked about. So you're saying that the men and women in Scripture and our Lord Jesus Christ felt like this, and you have never gotten to this point because you're so perfect. We may want to reconsider. We may want to reconsider our minds and stop trying to impress everybody around us. I'm done trying to do that. I've been done with that a long time ago. It's not worth it. Now, as we continue to study, notice what he says in verse 5. Then verse 5, as he lay and as he slept underneath the broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said unto him, Arise and eat. He looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on the coals and a jar of water. And he ate and he drank and he lay down again. What are we talking about? God, you made me feel so special. What are we talking about? Proverbs chapter 11, verse 25. He who waters will be watered himself. What is God doing to Elijah right now? I'm watering you. And I want you to see it. Now, at this point, yes, Elijah physically sees the food. He physically gets rest. He physically sees the water. But is Elijah really seeing it yet? He's not seeing it. The watering process. Think about the concept of what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 3, verse 6. I have planted, Apollos has watered, but God has given the increase. I love that phrase, watered. When we think about Apollos watered, God watered, he who waters, Proverbs 11. I've come to see from Scripture that the watering process is not necessarily the big things. The watering process is the things that we take for granted every day, but it just happens. You know, you ever had things in your life, or times in your life, or places in your life, or even people in your life, that they constantly did things that were really good. And they weren't big things, they weren't, giant things that everybody else would see or know about, but you know that they did it for you. And the moment that was gone, or that thing or that person or that thing was gone, you started to see that the small, insignificant things that people did and the small ways that they were there and they encouraged you and they prayed for you and they did things, all these small, minute things, when somebody stops watering you, you feel it. You feel it. Because in the moment, you take it for granted because, it's almost kind of like we treat things and people in life as like our security blankets. Oh, well, I know they'll be there still. I know that they'll still be available. Or I know this job will still be there. Or I know these great people and family will always be there. Like, I know that. But when that watering is gone, like, you feel that. But the watering process it's not grandiose. It's not this big thing. When you water, and I think it's a part of humility, you understanding when you water people and when you help them and when you encourage them and when you pray with them and you talk on the phone with them and you cry with them and you rejoice with them. Sometimes it's not a process that no one sees, but you're watering. So what is God doing for Elijah right now? He's watering him. An commentator talked about God's ministry to Elijah. And he said this, which I thought this was great. He mentioned God first ministered to Elijah's physical needs. This is not always his order, but he goes on to say, physical needs are important. Sometimes, watch this, this is huge. Sometimes the most spiritual thing a person can do is to get enough rest and replenishment. In my years in ministry, which is about a decade now, which I'm old, bro. That's crazy. And not just, and being a part of Preacher's family for 31 years. One of the phrases that I've gotten really good at saying is a small, small phrase, but it has saved a lot of health. You know what that phrase is? No. No. Many times we feel like we have to be the ones to do everything. And sometimes in our minds, what we've done is, and I talked to somebody about this not too long ago. Sometimes we make our busyness a badge of honor. So if I'm having a conversation with a person that I know or a person that I haven't seen in a while, if we start talking and we start saying what we're doing, and if my list of stuff that I'm doing is longer than that person's list, then therefore I've proved to that person that I'm doing a lot of stuff, whether for my family, whether for other people, or whether for God. So the more stuff that I can list off to you, well, man, I'm doing this right now. I'm doing this right now. I'm speaking at this right now. I'm going here right now. I got this right now. I got that right now. Man, I got all this stuff going on, bro. Now, let's take a quick pause for our extremists out there. You see, we have our extremists that go and swing the pendulum. Well, are you saying all those people that do those things are wrong and insane and blah blah blah? We're not gonna act like children, right? We're not gonna argue the point. What's the point we're arguing? We're arguing the point. Sometimes it's okay to say no. You see, we're doing apples and oranges here, and then we got people saying, well, if these people they're just mad because they're not getting asked to do this stuff. Then you got people over here, well, the people that do all this stuff, they're doing this stuff. It's a dumb argument. It's a stupid argument, actually. And it's a prideful argument because the people that get asked to do stuff, then they're prideful. Then the people that don't get asked to do stuff, then they're prideful that they're not asking to do stuff. So it's a stupid argument. So we're not arguing that. What are we saying? Regardless of what you're doing, you have to know, in whatever state you're in, you have to know when it's time to say, not right now. You have to know that, regardless of what you're doing. So what did Elijah have to learn? Elijah had to learn to sit down and eat something and replenish and refresh himself. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is get enough rest and replenishment. It's a great quote. It's a great quote. But then you take it and we can run with it. And that's not what we're going to do as we study this. So now notice what happens here, verse 7. The angel of the Lord came back the second time, and he touched him, and he said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. Now, he says this a second time. Now, I want you to notice where he's going. Now, if you look on a map from where God has taken him, basically from Mount Carmel to where he was, right, to go to Sinai, right? This was a 200-ish mile journey. We're talking, you're walking 200 miles. The journey. This is too big, man. This is way too big for you. Have you noticed that most prophets got that same message either from God or from someone else? Remember Moses? Moses was judging all the people, and Jethro said, hey man, if you keep this up, you're gonna kill yourself. You need help. You need to delegate. You're gonna kill yourself if you keep doing this. Well, I mean, this is God's work, man. Like, no one else is gonna do it right, so I gotta, okay. Say goodbye to your blood work. Say goodbye to your health. Say goodbye to your joints. Say goodbye to all these. If we want to serve the Lord for as long as possible, we're running ourselves ragged like all these cars, and we're not putting fuel in those cars. So we want to be here to help the Lord as long as His will has us here. But we want to be ready and capable to do these things. And I just don't want to just be dragging just because I'm doing good things. It's literally a discipline that God had to teach these prophets. And I believe that this is a discipline that God is still trying to teach us. But we just have to, again, sit and listen to what he's trying to do as he's watering us. I think sometimes, guys, let's be real. I think sometimes we get offended by God trying to water us. Well, God, I can't just sit here and rest right now. I got things to do. I got places to go. People expect me to be. I can't say you expect me to do this, but they expect me to be here and go all these places. It's almost like we take it as a sign of disrespect that God wants to water us. So no wonder we're walking around ragged, because we don't understand, and we don't know how to take watering from God, but we want to go water everybody else. Funny how that works, isn't it? We don't know how to take watering from God, but we think in our own strength we can water everybody else. You see the subtle points where pride just slips right in there. Slips right up in there. I hope we can see this. Because again, all these fingers are pointing at me. I hope we, W-E, big W, big E. I hope I'm putting me in here. I hope we can see this. Now let's keep going. Verse 7. Arise and eat, because the journey is too much for you. Verse 8. So he arose and he ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food for how long? 40 days and 40 nights, as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. Horeb, aka Mount Sinai. The same mountain Moses was at? Yes. Now, as we look at this, now I want you to notice what God is doing. This is a part of the watering process of how God is helping him. Now watch how he continues to water. And have you noticed this watering process isn't just one thing? Well, let me feed you a meal and you're good, right? All right, yeah, let me just checking. You're doing good, right? All right, sweet. Sometimes we try to rush because we're so fast. The watering process. Look, man, I sent him a text. I gave him a meal. I gave him bread. I gave him, like, that should be good, right? You see, watering in anything that needs water, whether a human body, whether a plant, regardless of what it is, anything that needs watering doesn't need watering just one time. So wait a second. The church, made up of bodies and people, made up of families, made up of couples, made up of singles, of widows, of families, of broken families, all these things. So you're saying that I can't just do something one time and then expect massive growth? I can't just preach a lesson one time passionately and just expect everybody just to change? No. You see, anything that needs water needs watering. It watered. Notice it's always in that form. It's not a one-time deal. So notice, as God is watering and as God is making Elijah understand how special he is, it's not once. You see, a lot of times, sometimes in our own lives, and I'm putting myself in there, as we teach, as we help people, as we're married to folks and do all these things, sometimes in our minds, well, I did it one time for you, so you should see it and appreciate it. You see, this is why, like, I see this too sometimes in people that you counsel. It's like, well, I mean, I gave her this. You know, she has this, he has this. I mean, I don't understand what the problem is. Well, I mean, I can see it glaringly, and you're not continuing to do it. It's a one-time thing. And I've been guilty of that, right? You know, you think you do something one time, all right, we're good. Like, you have to be a waterer is not a one-time deal. That is literally a lifestyle. He who waters will be watered himself. So guys, as we're starting to see this, as we're learning about this, I shouldn't be afraid to water those around me. I shouldn't be afraid that if I do this and they won't give it back. Or if I do this and they'll take advantage of it. Or if I do this, they'll just take it and go. Can that happen? Yes, it can happen. But when that happens, what am I supposed to do? He who waters will be watered himself. I have to believe in God's principles more than my own mind. That's how I unlock true service. If I got to sit here and think, do I need to serve her? I'm not feeling it. Not feeling it, man. If I serve, do I need to serve him? Man, last time I did this, they just took it. They didn't even do anything. There was no appreciation, man. So dumb. Yeah, I'll do it. I don't want to. I really don't. But I'm a Christian, so I got to do it. You see, we're not even close. We're not even close to unlocking what we need to unlock. Not even close. And I hope that this is a challenge to all of us. Now, watch the watering process of God. Verse 9. So he went to a cave. What cave? Now, we don't know this, but this is just a cool little detail. It's very possible, not saying that this is fact, but it's very possible that this is the same cave and the same mountain that God met Moses. Literally the same location. Now, if it is, that's a legit cool fact. If it's not, it's the same area. Just throwing that out there. Then he went to a cave and he spent the night in that place. Now watch this. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And circle it or highlight that phrase, the word of the Lord came to him. Whenever you see a prophet, that's how every prophet was called. It was never, man, I feel like I need to be doing this, so I'm just going to do this just so I can say this. It was always the word of the Lord came to me. The word of the Lord came to me. It's very interesting, that phrase. And God said to Elijah at the end of verse 9, I love that question. He said to Elijah, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Now, does God know the answer to that question? Yes. God's not dumb. Like, he knows the answer to that question. But why is God asking the question in his wisdom and knowledge? Why is he asking that question? God's not asking the question to prove to himself something. God is asking the question to show Elijah something. He's trying to show him, I'm trying to understand you. I want to listen to you. So what's another part of watering? Sometimes before you start doing stuff and giving stuff and speaking and saying stuff, sometimes, hey, what's going on? Hey, buddy, how are you? I'm good. What's going on? And then after you say what's going on, and after you say, hey, what are you doing here? Let them talk. Because I promise you, people got stuff to say. They got stuff to say. What are you doing here, Elijah? When you help your friends and family and spouses, like, you understand the problem, right? But you don't necessarily have to fix it right there. I want to hear you. What's going on, bro? And you just let them go and go and go. So what does Elijah do? God asks the question, so what does Elijah say? Elijah unloads. So what's he say, verse 10? I have been so very zealous for the God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant. They've torn down your altars. They've killed your prophets with the sword. I'm the only one left, and they want to take my life too. He unloads, right? So notice as he's doing this, and we talked about this maybe a couple weeks ago, looking at James 3, looking at Job, looking at David. God is strong enough, for lack of a better human term, that God can take your emotions. But sometimes that's where those little phrases of pride come in. Well, I've never been this. I've always done this. I've never not said this. Those are little phrases of people that are actually scared to really let go and really unload on God. Because you feel like in front of everybody else they can listen to you and have your opinion as valid, you always have to have it somewhat together. Well, we know you're not perfect, but I mean, you got to be on this platform, right? So we're afraid to really let people know, like, this is not right. This is not good. I'm feeling this to God. I don't even know how many of us have truly talked to God in such an open manner. You know why we don't do that? Because I think in our subtle pride, we've taught each other not to. Well, you got to trust God in all situations. So you're saying that Elijah didn't trust God here? Or you got to trust God in all situations. So you're saying that when Jesus was sweating blood drops and when he was in complete agony and when he asked Peter, could you not sit with me for 1 hour? So you're saying Jesus didn't need anything? You're saying Jesus didn't cry out to his Father? You see, what we'll do is we'll take something and we'll change it to fit what we're already doing. Have you ever truly lamented and let God know what's going on? He could take that. That's literally a part of the watering process. That's another reason why we don't know how to water. Because we feel like we got to be the ones to do all the water. I mean, I got to be the one to do all the preaching. I got to be the one to do all the teaching. I got to be the one. You see, that mindset alone will kill you. And I say that with all the love and compassion and love that I have. You will die from that. Because you haven't truly experienced what it feels like to talk to God in such an open manner. Because all you want to do is be God and water everybody else. It's a dangerous life to live. It's a dangerous game. I always say that. It's a dangerous game if you want to play that game. People will play. People will play. But like they say, you pay to play. And you could play it for a long time. But you will pay to play. You will pay to play. I don't want to play. I don't want to play. I don't want to play. So notice, what's he saying? Verse 11. What does God tell Elijah to do? Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, and behold, the Lord pass by. Now, again, I want you to, before we keep reading this, I want you to notice how the Bible talks about things. When you look at what God does here, you can't always look at it as super literal. You have to look at the imagery of what God is doing. And I'll explain that as we go on, okay? But the Bible is an imagery book, right? And this is imagery that God is painting. Now, let's move forward. The Lord passed by. A great and strong wind in the mountains broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord, but the Lord was not in that wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in that earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in that fire. And after the fire, a small, still voice. Now, what people do, they'll use this text to be like, see, look, God speaks to me. How does God speak to me? Just like he spoke to Elijah. He speaks to me in a small, still voice. You see, that's when you're taking the text super literal. God is painting a picture for Elijah. It's not the point about, well, God spoke to Elijah in a small, still voice, so he's got to be speaking to me in a small, still voice. What's the point? What's the entire context of what God is doing? God is watering Elijah. So what's he trying to get Elijah to see? What did God show Elijah in chapter 18? He showed him something big and grandiose, to where fire came from heaven and licked up that water from the sacrifice and burned the sacrifice. That's a big deal, right? That's huge, right? Who can miss that, right? Nobody can miss that. So the earthquake, big thing, God's not in it. Fire, big thing, God's not in it. Wind, big thing, but God's not in it. But then he speaks to Elijah. So what's the point? The point is not the small, still voice. What's the point? God is teaching us, as he waters us, that watering you doesn't always look like a big deal. Watering you doesn't always look like a big deal. You know, that's the breaking point, at least in my time in ministry and helping people. That's the breaking point that I've seen in relationships. And that's the breaking point that I've seen in congregations and other things. The breaking point is this. I feel like you should be doing this. And whatever the this is for them, 10 times out of 10, the this is always a big deal. If you just did this, that big thing for me, whatever you define as big, if you did this thing, then I know. Oh yeah, I know you love me. I know you're for me. I know you're my brother. I know you're my sister. If you did this big thing, whatever this is. But then the other person says, well, sorry I couldn't do this, but what about all these other little things that I'm doing? You're not even seeing it. It's literally invisible to you. But I keep doing these little things consistently. Well, you always do that. But I need this. See the problem? You see, we think with God and we think with other people. You make me feel special if you only do big things for me that I can see. So the moment that you stop doing the big things that make me happy, then guess what I can always say? You're not doing enough. So then guess who's the hero in the story all the time? You are. See how bogus that is? When you really look at that, you see how bogus that is? So what's God trying to teach Elijah? When I water you and when I take care of you, sometimes it's going to look like 1 Kings 18, where I deliver and fire is there. It's a big, grandiose thing. Sometimes it looks like just some bread and a meal. Well, that's kind of common. Well, that's water. I'm watering you. Sometimes it doesn't look like an earthquake. Sometimes it doesn't look like a wind. Sometimes it doesn't look like a fire. Sometimes it looks small. Can you see, Elijah? You see, the point is not, well, God speaks to me in the small, still voice. The point is the imagery that God is giving. And the imagery is the small things equate to the big things. But you have to see the small things that I am doing for you. So if we can't see the small things that God does for me all the time, when I attach myself to people, in relationships, when I attach myself to people in friendships, when I attach myself to people in families and other things, when I do that, and then now my standard for them is, I know you love me, I know you make me feel special if you do this big grandiose thing, you will always be a man and you will always be a woman who misses the little things. And you will always see yourself as the hero in every relationship, friendship, story ever. And you will always, I say this with love, care, and concern, you will always be somebody looking for something that doesn't exist. You will be looking for a person or a situation or a church that's not real. Why? Because you can't see the little things. And guess what? In order to see the little things, guess what I've learned? Guess what I've learned, guys? In order to see the little things, you got to stop talking. You got to stop talking and sit back and be quiet. They've always done that. Never noticed. They've always, when your voice gets high, you have an epiphany. They have kind of always been kind of nice, right? They've always kind of been there. Maybe you treated them terrible. Yeah, he's been a good guy. She's been a good girl. But in my pride, I'm not going to admit that, right? I'd rather not say nothing than admit that. Please, me say that. You see, now we can't grow. Now we can't grow, and we're not being honest. So I just don't want you guys to be in a situation where you make yourself lonely. It's one thing to be in positions where God has you in seasons of it, but guys, in my opinion, I think we make ourselves that way. And then we say, well, God put me in a lonely season. No, you've made yourself that way. You've transformed into that. Really quick, before we dive back into this, I want you to see something. In Zechariah chapter 4, right? Let me go here so I don't have to turn in my Bible here. So I can stay here. So Zechariah chapter 4, and I want you to notice verse 10. So the temple was destroyed. In the older generation, they saw Solomon's temple in all its glory. I mean, it's a beautiful temple, but that temple was completely destroyed. So now the new temple that they're building, Obviously, they don't have the same, anywhere close to the same materials that they had for Solomon's. But guess what? It's still a temple of God. But as they look at it, the new generation is happy because this is all they know. The older generation hates it because, well, ours was better. Don't we still have the same argument with stuff today? But notice what the prophet says in Zechariah chapter 4, verse 10. Let's start in verse 9. Actually, verse 8, just so I can show you something. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me. Same thing that God told Elijah. Saying, verse 9, the hands of Zerubbabel laid the foundations of this house. His hands will also finish it, and you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me unto you. Watch verse 10. For who has despised the day of the small things? So you know our God, when he waters you, when someone who has been watered from God, when a man or a woman comes into your life as a friend, as a family, as a congregation, when they have watered you, don't always look at the big things that they do for you. Stack up the small ones. Stack up the ones that you see all the time. Stack up the ones that are always there consistently. Don't despise the day of the small things. But some of us are waiting for big things. Oh, well, if this happens, then I know God cares. I mean, if God gives me this, like, it's undeniable. If this person, this family, if this church, if they do this for me, oh, yeah, I'm definitely special to them. There's no doubt that I'm special to this person. You're going to miss it. Don't despise the day of the small things. So what is God teaching Elijah? I'm not always in these big, grand, so stop looking for all these big things to happen. You need to start looking at the small ones. Now, let's keep going. Verse 13. So it was when Elijah heard that, he wrapped his face in a mantle, and he went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. When you wrap your face in a mantle, it's a humbling thing to do. So what we need to do, if you and I are honest, if we're trying to learn and study and grow with God, if we've treated people that has come into our life, if we've treated places and churches and people and families, if we've treated people like they need to do all this big stuff for me to be seen and for me to give to them, for me to serve them, and we see this and we see the small things that they've done, if you're a good and honest person, as we're all trying to be, sometimes we need to take time and we need to put that mantle on, and we need to be humble and humble ourselves. I missed it. Man, I missed the small things that they did. The small encouragements. They were just always kind of there, and I was just annoyed. Like, why are you always here? I don't want you here. They were always just there. They were always just nice. I just wanted nothing to do with them, but they were just so... Humble yourself, please. Or you could be prideful, and you can always justify, well, they should have done this, but I'll okay. Like, if that's what I've learned over the years, guys, is when people have that mindset, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, number one, it's not your job to prove to people that you're good. And two, as you keep loving and serving and helping, sometimes you have to let people figure it out. Because the Lord took so long with me, and it took me so long to see things. You have to do that too. And you got to give people the same grace. Because you know good and well that you needed it. Okay, so we just got to be fair. Okay, 14. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in the mantle. He went out and he stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, notice, same question. What are you doing here, Elijah? So what is God, guys? God is consistent in the small stuff. I'm going to keep helping you. I'm going to keep being there. I'm going to keep loving you. But God, I'm not healed yet. God, I'm not where I need to be yet. I'm still here. You know, that's one of the tragedies of life, is when we miss that in God, and when we miss that in people that God has sent our way. That's something that we're always going to regret. I just want to help. I just want to keep being there. I just want to the little consistent things. Just don't miss it. Verse 14. Now notice, his response is the same response that he said in verse 10. Verse 14. So he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant. They've torn your altars. They've killed your prophets. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. So notice, here's what it takes to be a good waterer of God, right? So Apollos was a waterer, right? Jesus was a waterer. God is. Here's what it takes to be a good waterer. You have to be consistent in doing the same stuff, even though those that you help are still at square one. So look at all the stuff that God did. God fed him twice. God made him rest. God talked to him and showed him about the small and the big things. God asked him, what are you doing here? He listened. He was concerned twice. So that most of us, if we do that for people that are around us, if we do that for our spouses, if we do that for the churches that are around us, man, look at all the stuff I've done, man. I've done all this stuff. I've done all that. They're just not responding. So therefore, because they're not responding to me the way I want them to respond, I'm going to stop watering them. That's where we mess up. That's where we mess up. Notice, what is God doing? God is extremely consistent. Did Elijah get it yet? Is Elijah seeing it? Is Elijah a 180 completely changed man yet? Is Elijah the perfect person we want him to be yet? No. Well, what is God? God is a consistent waterer. Apollos watered. He who waters will be watered himself. I think if that's all that I'm ever known as, or you're ever known as, well, I'm not a planter. Obviously, God gives the increase. I like a waterer. Don't you? It's a beautiful scene here. It's a beautiful scene. Let's keep going. Verse 15. The Lord said, go and return your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, anoint Hazael as king over Syria, and you shall anoint Jehu the son of Nimshi as king over Israel, and Elijah the son of Shaphat and of Abel Meloha you shall anoint as prophet in your place. It shall be that whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill. Whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elijah will kill. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Here's what's huge. Here's what's huge. I don't want you to miss what's so big about what God did. Now, as God is watering, right, and as God has encouraged Elijah, I want you to notice what he gives him. Not only does he feed him and helps him and listens to him and tries to understand him, but he knows the point where he looks at Elijah and says, okay, now it's time for you to do something. See, sometimes what we have to do is, and we have to ask wisdom and knowledge and more wisdom from God when it comes to this. But it comes to a point where when you know someone that's so downtrodden, there's a point where you have to do something. Where you can't just keep doing this and expect people to just do a 180. Like, you have to encourage them, hey, let's do something. So when God told Elijah, hey, you got to go to Damascus, anoint Jehu as king, is God saying, well, all right, I wipe my hands of you. All right, do your thing. Who's with Elijah the whole time? God, hey, look, we got to do something. All right, we spent our time that we need to spend here. We need to get out. We got to do something. We got to serve. So that's what he does. So again, this is a great commentary that said this. Elijah needed two things that God gave him. Elijah needed a friend, which, remember, what is he going to say at the end of from 19 to 21? For sake of time, we're not going to read that. But who does he come in contact with? Elisha. Beautiful. So he gives Elijah a friend, but also what does he give Elijah? He gives him hope. Hope of what? That after he dies, that the Lord's work is going to continue with Elisha and 7,000 other prophets. So what I'm doing is not pointless. It's not wasted. No one saw it. I'm just going to die out here. There's hope for the future. But then there's also hope, right, that his work would continue. And there's also hope for the next king, Jehu. So now God provides him hope. As we look at Elijah, God spent so much consistent time listening to him, trying to understand him, doing it again and doing it again. If we had more people who would, number one, understand how often God listens to you and how often God watches you and how often God sees you. And if we understood that, and if we had husbands who would spend the time to do that to their wives, and wives do that for their husbands, I'm trying to understand you. A lot of times it's one-sided too. Well, he needs to understand me. You know, he needs to sit here and give me all these things and understand me and listen to me and give me all I want. But then I give him kind of a bone every once in a while, but he needs to just do that stuff for me. I've seen too much stuff break like that. When we talk about Apollos watered and the concept of you make me feel so special. Again, I can't speak for you because that's not my role. That's not my responsibility to speak for you. I can only speak on my behalf. Sometimes in all of our lives, right, together, right, this is all of us here before I get to me. In all of our lives, guys, as we close these thoughts, I think so many times we spend stages of our life waiting for other people to make us feel special. And is that a sinful or bad desire? No, it's not. And I'm not suggesting that it is a sinful or bad desire. But I also believe that at the same time, we haven't taken the time to understand what it really means to water from God's perspective. Because if we did, I think we would know how to really help each other better. And for me, as I look at my life, right, as we learn, study, and grow, we got to be introspective, right? So I'm trying to be introspective here. I think being a waterer is okay. You know, instead of waiting for, and again, I'm not saying it's wrong or you're not waiting or you should be praying for things. But I think it's, and especially if you're single, I think it is a wonderful thing to understand and really indulge yourself in living Proverbs 11:25. He who waters will be watered himself. I think spending your time just indulging, watering people and listening to them and caring for them and not expecting necessarily a result from them, but the fact that you do it over and over and over. I used to have the mindset, if you keep doing this stuff and the result doesn't happen, all that work was for nothing. All these prayers that you've given, the sacrifices that you've personally made so someone else could elevate, if that doesn't work, all of this was for nothing. I used to think like that. But that's not the case. And that's actually the opposite of God's principle of how to water people and how he waters me and how he waters you. So maybe instead of waiting around for someone to make you feel special, maybe it's my responsibility to water other people. And maybe I'll truly understand then what it feels like to make someone feel special for real. God's way. He who waters will be watered himself. You see why I wanted to talk about this? You see why I wanted to walk through 1 Kings 19. And I mean, it's just how God does this. And again, we could have looked at, I had like 3 other texts we could have walked through, but I just chose 1 Kings 19. Maybe I'll do another one where we go through Jeremiah chapter 1. Ridiculous. There's so much, and the imagery in that is insane. But you see how rich the Bible is and how we can enjoy conversation as we study together and as we learn with each other. It's just, man, it's amazing. I'm so glad you guys are here. You're a part of this. And again, reach out to us, right? We want you to be a part of what we have going on here. So again, DM us on Instagram, Facebook, wherever, but also join our new community, right? We want you a part of the community. We want you interactive. We want you getting to know other people and encouraging one another. There'll be Christians in there. There's non-Christians who are trying to understand who Christ is. We want you just to be a part of that community. So, man, we love you guys. We appreciate you guys. And Lord willing, we will be back next week. Thanks, guys.